to me. Every day, I long deep inside of me. Every day, I long for what's plain to see. Every day, I long to be with you. Every day, I long for the truth. Just get on falling in love with you. More with everything you do. Speak out of mountains, tremble with love. And at the sound of your voice, know you are near, be near to me. And the rain falls like tears, and most days I cry, but facing my fears, the truth I won't deny. Just can't help falling in love with you. Love with you. More than every little thing you do. Speak out of mountains, travel with you. And at the sound of your voice, know you are near. Just can't help falling in love with you. Love with you. More than every little thing you do. Speak out of mountains, travel with you. And at the sound of your voice, know you are near, be near to me.
Press this. Nope, not that. Press this. All right. Yay, now we're live.
All right. Hello and welcome to Church Online with Pastors Newms and Bill.
Hola.
What'd you say, Newms?
I said hola.
Hola. So it's been a lovely day here in North Texas with some rain this morning after people, seeded the air with ions last night with all their firework popping, and then it rained this morning pretty heavily. And so how was 4th of July in Tennessee?
Boring.
Boring.
Yeah, so we had, where we're staying, we can't set anything off because we're in a neighborhood. We still don't have the house because of banking things we're hoping to hear tomorrow. And then, Nashville was going to televise theirs, and they canceled it. And then Murfreesboro didn't set theirs off. They just canceled it. And so, because we hadn't planned past, well, Dad just had knee surgery. The girls don't like it live. We're just going to watch it. It went from, all right, we got things to do, to I played Ark all night and had a lot of fun, and the girls watched a movie with my parents. So it was kind of, had some fun in there, but that's not the place to talk about it,
For us, we grilled some hamburgers, and my wife bought these little glow-in-the-dark bouncy balls for the kids to play with, and after Finnick went to bed, we went out in the front yard with the baby monitor and played out in the almost dark into the dark and watched neighbors pop fireworks, and it was pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. All right. I'm going to send a message to everyone watching live, which currently is no one. But
Yeah. I was like, there's no one on Twitch. The number is 0.
that's okay. If somebody gets on, they'll see the comment on Facebook or YouTube or Periscope or Twitch, which is all those places that we're live every Sunday evening at 6:30 p.m. Central, right now, daylight time, Central Standard Time in the fall. So other than, a boring 4th of July, how was your week?
Frustrating with the house stuff, but
With the house, I bet. Yeah.
yeah.
And then, you shed some pounds there.
I made it look like I put on pounds though, because now you can
does
fully
look like
see.
It definitely looks like you put on pounds.
You can definitely see more of my chin on both sides. I didn't.
Wait.
It's been there, but
It's just been hiding behind the fluff.
it has.
And when you first got on live on the video, you didn't have a hat on, and it was freshly shaven.
Yeah.
And then there was just the goatee. I was like, Biggs? Oh, no, that's Biggs Jr.
Yeah. Now Biggs is still with his knee, and Dad had his knee surgery on Tuesday. He's doing real good. Their 38th wedding anniversary was this week.
Nice.
So that was fun. That was the day we were supposed to move out. The second date that just rolled right past.
Yeah.
So
No joy.
hopefully Monday we'll hear, and hopefully Thursday we'll move. Which is funny because that will then be my mother's birthday. So my mother's birthday present will be, have
her house back to herself.
Yeah. But I might still have to come over here for a week or so just to take care of my dad during the day. But, because he's almost back to being able to get around by himself, but he still struggles with certain things because, he had a total knee replacement of one of his knees, a week ago. So.
That's rough.
It's a big scar.
Yeah, so my week, a big scar. So my week was about normal. I mean, not really anything out of the ordinary. I did have one trip where I took a local elderly lady to go get her Social Security check and to pick up some groceries. And I'm not doing a whole lot of driving right now, but I got that one local customer, whatever. And when I was in the local supermarket, not Walmart, but there's another supermarket, they had signs on all the registers, and it said, if you're going to buy 10 pounds of ground beef, like I assume because 4th of July was coming up, if you're going to buy 10 pounds of ground beef, you can only buy one, and only if you also buy $25 worth of other merchandise too. And so that was interesting. They're rationing ground beef in 10-pound rolls.
Well, you guys had another uptick real bad.
Real bad. Double what our worst caseload was when coronavirus first hit is where Texas is right now as a state. So we're
Rutherford County, where Murfreesboro is, the county Murfreesboro's in, had a real bad week with it. Nashville was okay, but we'll see after. People are like, we don't need masks at all now. We're good. It's gone.
Ugh.
And you're like, no.
As far as the state goes, they've rolled restaurants back to 50% capacity for indoor eating. Fast food restaurants haven't opened their lobbies yet. What was I gonna say? Oh, bars are closed, just completely closed altogether.
Yeah.
They reclosed all the bars. And then my favorite local Spanish, Tex-Mex restaurant, Casa Torres. They just straight put out one of those A signs out front. That's chalkboards. And they hadn't opened their lobby even though they could have, and they were just doing to-go orders. But they've just put a sign out and said closed until further notice. Call the voicemail for updates, and I'm afraid they're not gonna make it.
Sadly,
And
a lot of restaurants aren't.
Yeah, that's like the crown jewel of Decatur, Texas, and
At least in your mind.
so. Well, I mean, when you go to a restaurant that is hard to find a parking spot every hour of the day that they're open, it's not just my mind.
Well, some people would classify other things as, they like it, but the crown jewel they might give to, a tobacco shop or something,
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, it's definitely the crown jewel. It's probably the crown jewel of all of Wise County, actually, the whole county I live in. Well, now that might go to NRS, the National Roper Supply, because they bring in the bull riders and the bull championship.
Well, and there are also the co-op.
The co-op. Which one? The electric co-op or the co-op?
No, the feed store.
Oh, yeah. The feed store, yeah. Yeah, that's the kind of neighborhood I live in. So, neighborhood. That's the kind of community that I live in. No, it's not a street.
I should move the mouse off your face.
You should what?
I should move the mouse off your face before your wife comes in and tells me that the mouse is on your face.
If she even notices, I don't think she realizes that it's 6:30 yet. She hasn't gotten on yet. Or at least the stats tell me there's nobody on yet. But all right, so Liberty.
Can't read
Liberty,
it, but
Liberty. Right. So we, and then this thing that's going away after we finish talking tonight, gonna go into storage. So this week's podcast, actually, you know what? This is taco in American Sign Language right here. This taco. I learned that this week. Taco. I want some tacos.
No. Go away.
Why are you saying? You saying no to my taco?
No. I'm saying no to you trying. No.
I can try to learn
No.
ASL.
Nope.
No. Okay. So this week's podcast was Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit. And it was very topical given that it was the July 4th weekend and, all of that. So did you have any impressions from the podcast you wanted to share?
No, I enjoyed it. I mean, it was. Whoa, I almost said it. Whoa, did you hear it? I almost said it.
Was it valid?
I almost said valid. I really did.
You almost said valid. You really did. You almost said it was valid.
So no, I enjoyed it. It's always interesting to see. To try to glean some of the meanings behind what we follow, because not everyone does. Some people just blindly follow, and that's something we typically don't do here. You care more than I do, but things like that.
Oh, I see. I care more than you do.
Yeah.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
Wow. Right. So, specifically, what we were talking about is the line from the Declaration of Independence, written by Thomas Jefferson. Sorry, one of my armrests is all loose. It's bugging me. All right, I fixed it. It is the line: "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." And I was telling you, ow.
Are you just falling apart there?
I bit my cough drop while I was trying to talk into a cavity, and that hurt really bad.
I'm gonna go home.
Cough drops out of my mouth. What?
I said I'm gonna go home.
You are home.
I don't have a home.
Your current home, the home you're living in right now.
I
I'm
can't.
in my home.
I can't go home. Continue.
How many
Sorry.
thousands of miles away are we from each other?
around 700-ish.
Oh, okay. It's not even 1,000. Cool.
I don't think it is. Tina, it's like 700 miles, right?
What is?
Us and them.
Yeah.
She must be watching something on her phone.
It's just
Mhm.
700.
Yeah, just about 700, she said.
Okay. So last week I had mentioned that I don't have a problem with, and I mentioned this in the podcast, I don't have a problem with the life and the liberty part. But on face value, I take issue with the happiness part because the modern view of happiness is all too often synonymous with greed, right? It's what can I get for myself? What can I attain? Me, mine, you know?
Mhm.
And that's all too often the modern idea of happiness. So, on face value, when you read life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, if you don't take the time to then look into what did Thomas Jefferson mean when he wrote this, then you might think he's endorsing life, liberty, and capitalism, or life, liberty, and consumerism, or life, liberty, and alcohol, or life, liberty, and whatever.
Whatever your happiness is.
Yeah. But that's not what he's endorsing. Who knew? Well, I guess he did.
It is sometimes a problem with assumptions on what our laws mean and what our everything means.
Well, it'll always be a problem with the English language. We'll write something, or actually not even just with the English language.
That's any
You
language
run
for
into
that
the
part.
issue with,
Yeah.
you run into the issue with the Bible too. You run into scriptures where you're like, well, what did they mean? But as language changes and words change meaning and basic morals change and things like men start wearing pants where when the Bible says men not to wear like women, pants was a woman clothing and women wear dresses, and when the Bible said men shouldn't wear dress like women, dresses was the men's clothing, and
Yep.
and now morally those, culturally those have changed in
America. In some countries,
Yeah.
it's still
some countries it's still the same.
robe and robe.
But it's interesting as you go back to read things that your
Yeah.
forefathers wrote that people wrote before, and as language has changed, we lose perspective on, well, what did they mean when they wrote this, and we actually have to go back and figure out what they meant.
Hope to.
Say again.
Hope to
Figure out what they meant.
Because
Yeah.
sometimes it's not clear, and you got to do a lot of digging, and then you got to go, we're pretty sure this is what they mean.
Yeah, we're pretty sure based off of what they said, this is what they mean.
Well, it's kind of
So-
like it's kind of like what you were saying in the beginning. All men are created equal. Well, that wasn't the man as we think about man nowadays either at that point.
In Thomas Jefferson's mind, it was, and we're gonna hit on that here in a little bit. But in the people who then signed the Declaration, we know that it wasn't, because then they went on to create the 3/5 compromise later, much later.
And women couldn't
and
vote
so
at that
we know-
point, and it was
and women
basically
couldn't vote.
it was basically
Yeah.
white people who
So-
owned land. But
That's exactly what it was. It was white people on land.
white dudes who owned land.
And then if you were not a white dude who owned land, but you were also male, then your vote was worth 3/5 what a normal person's vote was. And I'm not sure how they would do the math on there, whether they would round up at the end or round down at the end. I don't know. Did you hear that there was recently they were kicking around the idea in California of creating their own 3/5
I
compromise
was
with
really, really hoping that was just a TikTok.
prisoners?
I was really hoping that was just a TikTok.
Like, do we count coronavirus numbers for prisoners as whole people, or do we do like some kind of compromise where we don't count them as a whole person? No. You definitely have to count them as whole people. But they're all like together. They're not out in the pot. Yeah, you still have to count them as a whole person. That's a thing. Okay. Right. So we've kind of a loaded night tonight. So we're gonna get through some of this. We're gonna hit on life. We're gonna hit on liberty. We're gonna hit on happiness. We're gonna hit on something that is one of my personal views that not everybody agrees with, and we're also gonna talk some about Thomas Jefferson and slavery, because whenever you talk about Thomas Jefferson and things that Thomas Jefferson wrote, if you're going to have an honest conversation, then you have to have an honest conversation. So we're going to have an honest conversation. All right. So life. When you talk about life, the thing that pops into my mind is automatically the quote from Jesus that the disciple John recorded in John 10:10, where Jesus says, "A thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come so that they may have life and have it in abundance." You know, that's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And we know, from reading through the New Testament, I brought up Romans 5 in the actual podcast, but it's throughout the New Testament. We know that death entered the world through sin, and sin entered the world through Adam. Now, when I was growing up, there was always that running joke in church that if only Eve hadn't eaten that fruit and sent us down this road, if only Eve hadn't da-da-da-da. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I actually, found in the Bible where, the Bible places 100% of the blame on the shoulders of Adam, not Eve. So sin enters the world through Adam, and then Jesus comes and gives us life. Now, not that he makes us immortals physically, because that's not what happens. Our bodies are still fallen bodies. Our DNA still inherited death and all those things, but he came to give us spiritual life. And then we get to liberty, which most people in the United States are all for liberty until the liberty is exercised by someone who doesn't agree with what they believe, or when you ask them to wear a mask. And then they, it's not about other people's right to life and liberty and me doing whatever I can to help my country. Suddenly it's about, well, you're infringing on my liberty, and everyone else shouldn't have the freedom to say what they want to say and do what they want to do. So that's what, oh, that's loud in my ear.
Sorry,
So
it's right next to the mic, and Dad is saying he is sorry he had fallen asleep, and I'm like, dude, you had surgery 5 days. No, just
right. So we get to John chapter 8, and we look at verses 31 and 32. And Jesus says, or rather it's written that, then Jesus said to the Jews who had believed him, "If you continue in my word, you really are my disciples. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free."
Mm-hmm.
So freedom comes specifically from a truth of, following in Jesus' teachings, and Jesus' teachings leads to an enlightenment of the truth that then, brings freedom. And in Galatians 5, Galatians 5, Paul writes, "For freedom Christ set us free. Stand firm then, and don't submit again to a yoke of slavery." And we know in context there that he's not talking about slavery to sin in this, paragraph. He's talking about slavery to the law.
Right.
Don't start following the law again. And what specifically brings it up, the instance that brings it up, is circumcision. There are people that are saying, well, the law says you have to be circumcised. So in order to be a Christian, as a Gentile, someone who isn't a Jew, in order to become a Christian, you'd have to be circumcised. And Paul's going, whoa. You can't just pick back up the law like that. Christ fulfilled the law by being the sacrifice. all of the law was fulfilled. We don't have to do those things anymore because the permanent sacrifice was given. So that's taken care of. And in Galatians chapter 5, verse 4, he says, "You who are trying to be justified by the law are alienated from Christ. You have fallen from grace." Which is an interesting, I don't know, it's an interesting concept for me because there's so many people that are trying to be justified by their religion or by their set of morality that is informed by their religion.
But I'm still a good person.
In reality, right. But in reality, by trying to find justification in your religion, by trying to find justification in your morality, you've abandoned Christ and you know, damned yourself to hell. That one's kind of an iffy ground, though, you know, because can you lose your salvation?
Yeah.
If you know, did you ever really have it to begin with? If you were able to walk away, and that's not the conversation for tonight. But I have in my notes Colossians 2:20, but now I can't remember why I wrote that down. Oh, I remember what it is, but I'll have to pull it up because I didn't write down what it says.
I only have one monitor. I'm kind of up the creek. Sorry.
Without a monitor. All right, Colossians 2:20 is right along with that that religion thing, you know, him trying to get people to steer clear of picking back up the yoke of religion. It says, "If you died with Christ to the elements of this world," he even goes as far as to call religion elements of this world, "why do you submit to regulations? Don't handle, don't taste, don't touch." All these regulations refer to what is destined to perish by being used up. They are human commands and doctrines. Now, although these have a reputation for wisdom by promoting self-made religion, false humility, and severe treatment of the body, they are not of any value in curbing self-indulgence. So he's saying, you know, you think you've set yourself up as a follower of Christ and a religion of Christ, but what you've done is created, and I mean, my Bible calls this paragraph the Colossian heresy. You've set for yourself up a heresy where, you know, you're actually worshiping self. You've made an idol out of yourself.
Yeah.
Instead of worshiping Christ.
I'm following all the rules. I've done everything I should do, not Jesus. You know, because that's really what's important. We oftentimes look at the fact of, okay, we should be working towards being Christ-like. There are fruits of the Spirit we should be working towards. There are things that should be evident in us. That doesn't mean following the letter of the law to the craziness. You know, we've spoken multiple times about the spirit of the law. You know, there's a reason why those rules were written. Those are what we shouldn't be overindulging to the point where, you know, we fall over. We shouldn't be doing those types of things because it's not healthy and it's not good for us, not because it's going to damn us. You know, and so it's that whole we have to find that, making sure we're not creating idols out of things we're not supposed to, like you're saying.
Because it's easy to do as humans. It's very, very easy to make anything into an idol. So, okay, and then we get to happiness. Or, as Thomas Jefferson more understood it, it would be what we think of in our modern mind as the word contentment, to be content. And I included an excerpt from a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to William Short in October of 1819. Now, I included the link in the blog, you know, in the transcription of exactly what this letter is, because William Short used to work for Thomas Jefferson as his, well, they call it secretary. Now we would call it, we still use the word secretary in government, outside of government, we wouldn't call what he did as secretary. It'd be like attaché or executive assistant. It's not the same thing as we think of now as secretary.
It's much more than what we classify as a secretary.
A whole lot more. And they wrote back and forth a lot. And so there's a lot of letters between them. And so I gave the link to the exact one. But the quote, and I thought about reading the quote, but even for me, reading the quote, I have a hard time pulling the information that we're trying to get out of the quote. And so I had to rely on other scholars of Thomas Jefferson and people who wrote about the letter for them to tell me that that's what he was saying. And it wasn't like I went to one website somewhere. I went to several different voices to make sure that they all agreed this is the idea that he's trying to communicate to William Short. And it's that happiness that he's talking about comes from regulating your experiences and finding contentment where you are and what you have, what's right there in front of you, which lines up with what Paul wrote in Philippians chapter 4, verses 11 through 13, where he says, I don't say this out of need, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I find myself. I know both how to make do with little, and I know how to make do with a lot. In any and all circumstances, I have learned the secret of being content, whether well-fed or hungry, whether in abundance or in need. And here's that scripture used in context. I am able to do all things through him who strengthens me.
Yeah.
Paul says, because of him who's in me, I'm able to find contentment, whether I'm hungry or well-fed, whether I have money or I have lack, whether I'm poor or I'm in the hospital or I'm in chains or I'm a free man, whatever's going on, I've learned through him who is in me, through Christ, to find happiness, to find contentment in what I'm going through. And even, when you're growing up and you learn about the Great Depression, and one of the shock facts that they throw at you right away in high school is about the suicides, when the stock market plunged and people lost so much money they started committing suicide. And you think, surely we've learned our lesson by now, and that things have turned around. And then the stock market plummeted because of coronavirus, and there were some people who reacted the same way as they had reacted in the Great Depression. And so this thing that they thought was happiness, this thing that they thought was worthy of their investment, their time, and all this stuff, gets pulled out from underneath them, and then there's no contentment, there's no peace, there's no there's nothing to fall back on, because they were pursuing greed. There's got to be a better word for it than that, but that's the only word that keeps popping to mind when I try to explain the concept. They're pursuing greed instead of pursuing contentment.
Yeah.
And I almost feel like Thomas Jefferson was trying to sneak that one in under the radar, because I think if he had said contentment, maybe one of the other people that was on the committee to draft the Declaration of Independence, which, by the way, boo to you guys making Thomas Jefferson do all the work and then just coming in and changing one line here and one line here and one word here and then signing off as if it was your own work. That's not cool. But I digress, because I was always the guy in school that, Bill will do the work and then we'll all get the grade. That was me. So, anyway. All right. Do you have anything you want to bring up before I go on my little personal thing, and then we'll talk about Thomas Jefferson and slavery?
No, I think it's, I mostly agree. It's fundamentally the same thing. I've always viewed the pursuit of happiness as, it's not it shouldn't be a dig, like you're saying. It should be, a pursuit to be happy, not to find happy, and that's a big difference. Or to get happy. I don't know.
Yeah. All right. So here's my little thing, and you already know what I'm going to say, or if you don't, you will pretty soon, because we've talked about it before. I am happy and blessed to have been born in the United States of. Will you wake up? Come on, man. He's falling asleep over there. I am blessed and happy to be born in the United States of America. I'm thankful to God for where I was born and the opportunities that have been given.
And when?
And when I was born, yeah. Compared to other countries, I've totally got this national privilege going on. To be born a citizen of the United States of America gives me huge privilege over so many people born in so many other countries. And every person born an American citizen is highly privileged compared to, billions and billions and billions of people all over the world. But, I guess not really but, however, I don't agree with the colonial rebellion against the King of Britain that we're currently celebrating. I don't agree with that rebellious act, and I don't agree with it on the basis of Romans chapter 13, verses 1 through 2. And I'm going to read Romans 13, verses 1 through 2. Acts, Romans, come on, flipping the Bible pages. Let everyone submit to the governing authorities, since there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are instituted by God. So then, the one who resists the authority is opposing God's command, and those who oppose it will bring judgment on themselves. In my opinion, see, I'm saying that. I'm not saying this is rock solid fact. I'm saying, in my opinion, the way I read that scripture, what they did in rebelling against the King of Britain was a rebellion against God. They opposed the authority that God had put over them. Now, can God and did God then move after the situation to make the best of what had happened? Absolutely. Was God surprised by their rebellion? Not at all. And that's how I feel about it. There you go. I got it off my chest.
Mm-hmm.
All you guys say is
Well, as you know, I agree that any push against leadership and things is often construed in the way that you feel. But on the same token, especially with the colonial situation, the majority of the people that got here originally were trying to escape said leadership to begin with. And that was the whole point of coming here, was to rebel. So, coming to the colonial America, overall, for lots of those people, in and of themselves, the Boston Tea Party is not a surprise. Because a lot of the people that got here were doing so to escape Europe in one way or another. Or they were kicked out of Europe. One or the other. So, it's that whole thing of that act that we're celebrating is not necessarily what I even would view as the transgression in this situation. But there are often times that, in a situation where God is putting leadership over people, the leadership does have to be changed. And that's not necessarily anti-Bible, because in the Bible multiple times, kings were overthrown by prophets and other people because they were told to. So there is that line between.
There was no overthrow here. There was just a, well, we don't want to be your citizens anymore, so we should declare ourselves not.
Yeah, that's an overthrowing. That's a changing of leadership. That's an overthrow. You can argue the semantics.
If it was an overthrow, then they would be in charge of everyone who used to be under that king as well. That's an overthrow.
We basically did over time. Except for the actual islands.
They're still in control of their own country.
Except during World War II. We came in and reset it back up. Just saying.
Now, did it all turn out well? Yes. It all turned out very well. No, it did. Compared to
other places.
Say, China, we're sitting pretty. All of us are sitting pretty. Whether you feel discriminated against or not, compared to people in China, you're sitting pretty. Compared to people in most places in India, you're sitting pretty. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about Thomas Jefferson, because I've seen a lot of heat thrown at Thomas Jefferson over the last week on social media and, all over the place because he owned slaves.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And he really, really liked his slaves, too.
Well, we're not going to have that conversation, but we are going to have a conversation.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So Thomas Jefferson wasn't okay with slavery. Let's just start off with that. And he pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed to have slavery outlawed, right? In all of the things that he did and all the letters that he wrote and all of the laws that he supported, he always pushed for slavery to be outlawed, while at the same time owning slaves. So let's historically look at what Thomas Jefferson went through and how he was reconciling owning slaves with wanting to abolish slavery at the same time. So by the time Thomas Jefferson was 21, he didn't own any slaves, which for the day and time for someone with his amount of money was unheard of. He should have already had a plantation. He should have already had his own slaves. He didn't want that life, but he inherited a plantation and 30 slaves when his father died. So then he owned 30 slaves. So he had a choice to make. He could either run the plantation and try to treat these fellow human beings as close to human beings as the law would allow, or he could sell them to someone who was going to treat them like property and beat them and so on and so forth. So he chose just to keep ownership of the 30 slaves. Then his wife's father died, and they inherited another plantation and 135 more slaves. So then he owns 165 slaves. By this point, he has decided he needs to make a change in culture and what goes on with slaves. Over the whole course of his lifetime, he owned about 600 slaves.
Excuse me.
And from the outside, what?
I said, excuse me. I had a hiccup.
From the outside, looking at Thomas Jefferson's life, that's evil. That's an evil man. He owns slaves. I'm right there with you. No human being should own another human being unless that human being is a complete invalid and you literally 100% altruistically are taking care of them and you're their guardian, legal guardian. You know what I mean?
And then that's just a legal aspect, like what you're talking about with Thomas Jefferson in large ways.
In large ways, yes. Okay. So the things that Thomas Jefferson did to try to fix the problem internally inside of his plantation was he gave up growing tobacco, which is a year-round, very labor-intensive crop. He switched to other crops that would allow the least amount of work possible. He finally got it down to where each of his slaves would only have to work in the field 1 month a year. 1 month a year, each of his slaves worked in the field. The rest of the time, They were living in communities he had built on his property that were as fancy as he could make them without breaking the law. He put in schools to teach the slaves to read and write and learn history and learn math, which actually was against the law, but he went ahead and did it anyway. Then he brought in skilled tradesmen that trained anyone who wanted to opt into the training how to be blacksmiths, how to make clothes, how to do woodworking, all of these different trades that these people never would have had access to. And then when they would make something that was of worth, he would go and sell it, and he would give them every penny that he legally could as their profit for the item they had made. And the rest of the money from that item went into improving the community of those people on his property. The slaves that lived under Thomas Jefferson's ownership had better lives than any other slave in the country. Is it wrong to own slaves? Absolutely, 100%. If you lived in a civilization where you were put in the same position as Thomas Jefferson was, what's the greater evil? Releasing the slaves to go be abused and owned by someone else and worked to death and killed, or what Thomas Jefferson did? What are your options, you know? And as far as I'm concerned, I think he handled the situation pretty well. I wouldn't want to be put in that situation.
Now, because there wasn't freemen mostly at that time, and so it did make some serious issues that he had to make choices on. It's not like he lived.
Yeah. Go ahead.
It's not like he lived closer to freedom where you could release and there was free. It wasn't. There wasn't really even the indentured servitude side of it that there was towards farther parts. It is hard, and you know, I'm glad I've never had to be in that position.
Me too.
Although,
of course, you know, I've got a fair amount of Irish in me. So if I was alive at the day, I would probably be a slave, because the first slaves on U.S. soil were Irishmen, and we were sold for about a quarter of the value that black slaves were when they came to our shores.
it's because you don't have souls.
Thanks.
No problem. Redheads don't have souls. Everyone knows it.
Anyway.
Just gonna leave that floating in the air.
Yep, just gonna leave it out there.
My wife told me I have to behave.
Yeah,
I'm not going to.
I didn't think so.
Okay.
Right, so slavery's bad.
Yes.
So I saw this video of these people earlier in the week. They were talking about tearing down a statue, and they were like, so, you know, we want to tear down the statue, but we're not going to do it today. We're going to meet again on Thursday, and we're going to tear down the statue. The statue in question was a statue that was designed, built, and raised by freed slaves in honor of the Emancipation Proclamation. And it was a group of black people wanted to tear down the statue because of white people. And they didn't show back up on Thursday. I think somebody let them know that
Well,
they were
and
being stupid.
the problem is in the culture that we live in right now, we have made a mistake that's joked about and talked about throughout all of time, is we have not learned from our history. And when I say that, I mean everybody. I'm not talking one specific group. I'm not talking, we have all remade the mistakes we have made in the past. And one of those
last one of us
is not knowing what crap is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, you have, you know, taught in school, Christopher Columbus. You know, only in America are we taught the things we're taught about Christopher Columbus. Everyone else in the world goes, the guy was an idiot. You guys know that, right? Like, the guy's hardcore an idiot, right? And like what some people said is they're like, yeah, I agree, but I'm only okay with tearing him apart if we give the indigenous people their own day, because I need that day off work. And that's what a lot of people's thought process is, where I don't want to down it too much because I get a day off work. And you're like, what? Huh? And what it's come down to is it's individualism over community so much.
Yeah.
Not over nationalism, because nationalism is dangerous sometimes as well.
Can be.
Depending on how far you take it.
Yeah,
But-
when it becomes socialist nationalism, looking at you, Democratic Party.
Or when it becomes a worshiping of the state as opposed to, things like that.
Yeah.
But that being said, we look at oh well, the Confederacy is this and the Union was this and the Democratic Party is this and the Republican Party is this. So because of that, this is what it is. And it's like, well, neither side is innocent in any of the past. And neither side is valid in all situations. You have to align yourself with the person that you feel matches your morals the most if you choose to exercise your right to vote. Because technically that is how people get elected in this country. And people who don't vote make it harder to make sure that things happen correctly, because then God has to pull off miracles as opposed to just being able to do what he needs to do. Just saying.
Which Romans 13 already says he does. So, there's that.
Right. But we shouldn't have to force him to make votes mysteriously appear or disappear from parties.
Or if God said he's already got it in the bag, we can just sit back and let God take care of it instead of busying our hands and trying to do God's work, and just let God do God's work.
Yes,
and
but
not vote.
But if we listen to the Holy Spirit and act upon how we should, similar to the fact that we are supposed to preach and pray for people when we're told to, in similar things, God can make anything happen, but he still works through us.
The Holy Spirit ain't ever told me to vote. So.
I'm aware. But possibly it's because you've never prayed for who you vote for. Just saying. Because you have a belief that you shouldn't. And I'm not downing that overall. I'm simply stating to not down the other side, because God does speak to some people, they feel, that they should vote because of it. So you do have to be careful with certain beliefs.
I didn't down anybody.
I didn't say you did.
Conversation with the same gusto that you are, same attitude you are.
Oh, I'm not saying you are. Some people do. It's that joke we have about me being a Calvinist, because I'm not truly a Calvinist. But there's the joke about me being a Calvinist, right? Calvinists technically believe we should not preach. We should not we should not try to win people to the Lord. Yeah, because everyone who's going to come to the Lord is going to come to the Lord. Well, that don't make no sense, because the Holy Spirit works through us. Now, there are times where people magically, the Holy Spirit's like, okay, everyone around me is an idiot. No one's listening. I'm just going to go talk to this person over here by myself. And all of a sudden, the person's like, a man in white came and told me a story, and you're like, yeah, that's just Jesus. Did you not know about that? No one's told me. Ooh, our bad. So because of that, there are times, like I'm saying in certain elections, there are times where if everyone had acted how we should have, not saying people who don't have the tug to do so, but the large swath of people who don't allow people to be exalted that shouldn't necessarily be exalted, due to, similarly to how God told the Israelites, you don't want a king. And they said, yes, we do. You don't want a king. Yes, we do. Okay, here's a king. Similarly, we don't want this. We want this person. No, you don't. We want this person. No, you don't. We want this person. Fine, take them. Because we're going to learn something from it. Just because he does appoint all leadership does not mean all leadership is good. And does not mean we could not have different leadership if it was needed. That's all I'm saying. And we both disagree with each other on this one fact and always have and always will. I don't have a permanent address right now, so I'm going to end up missing this next election, sadly. Because it's technically illegal for me to register where it's not my permanent residence, and I no longer live at the old one in it. So, anyway.
Can't you get a P.O. box and register via P.O. box?
I don't have an ID for this state. And you
So
have to
can't
have...
get a
You
P.O.
have
box
to
in the
have
state 'cause
permanent...
You don't have an ID?
You have to have permanent residence to get voter registration. A P.O. box is not technically permanent residence.
I bet if you die, you'll automatically be registered as a Democrat, and then you can vote.
I'm going to leave that one alone.
I'm only saying it because it's happened in the last 3 presidential elections where they found at least 20,000 dead people voted Democrat in the last 3 presidential elections, and that's just in Florida alone. So I'm just saying it happens.
Florida is special. We all know they are. Just look at one of my favorite TikTokers. He will admit to it. I think in one of his most recent, he said, all states have their job. Ours is to entertain the rest of y'all. He was like, all right, that's true. He goes, what news would you read if it didn't start with man from Florida? And I was like, those are the best stories. You're not wrong, homeboy who does the weird, wow, why did I just turn orange?
You did. You hardcore turned orange. Something about your camera. There it goes. It's going back to normal now. Oh, nope. It's orange again. Yeah, my wife likes this lady on TikTok. She goes, it's Florida Man Friday. And she's playing the keyboard. And she tells crazy stories about Florida people.
They're a special breed. That's all I'm saying. I don't know why my significant other decided to live there with someone from there. That was just... And then she thought that was a good idea. But, that's okay.
It didn't last long.
Oh, look, she's quiet.
She got quiet.
Quiet
All right,
over
well,
there.
that's all we have for
Oh,
you
dirty
tonight.
look!
Huh?
I said, oh, dirty look!
Dirty look. That's all we have for you tonight. So the podcast that's coming out tonight is Balaam the Prophet. And so we're going to have some Bible story time. Talking about Balaam the Prophet. Did you know there's more to Balaam's story than a talking donkey? Did you know that?
His ass is not the only thing talked about in the Bible. That is correct.
That's true.
It's also when I was in elementary school and my dad was a youth pastor, one of the youth was kind of a jerk. And based on the story of Balaam, I called him a biblical donkey hole. And my father did not know whether or not to punish me, so I got away with it somehow magically and got told to never say things like that in public again. Look at me now!
That's weird. All right. So go listen to the podcast. Have a great week. We love you. Thanks for joining us either, on the podcast audio or in the video. And we are live every Sunday evening at 6:30 Central Time. And then the audio of the new podcast comes out on Sunday evenings. So you can pick that up on Mondays. Or if you prefer to see my pretty face with my lovely backdrop and my microphone. Newms, stop making those faces. Stop that. Stop
Heather-
that, Newms. That's
Heather-
not cool. And
Heather
you can
just-
pick it up on Wednesdays
Heather just
at
walked through the
7.
room doing like this.
Did
That's
she really?
That's what that face was for, not because of what you were saying.
So check out our stuff and come find me on TikTok. I make some... Nah, I'm not funny. I try, but I'm not funny. But come check out my TikToks and...
And put a real shirt on.
Huh? I have a real shirt on.
No, you one of the TikToks you sent me. You were wearing a fake shirt, and it was like, oh.
I was wearing a fake shirt, or
Yeah.
I was wearing my white "It's time to clean my undershirts" shirt.
You were wearing an A shirt. Yes.
Yeah, that's my okay. This is my last clean undershirt. I better wash my undershirts now. That's what that shirt is.
And hopefully, when you join us next week, I will be in my new house. Hopefully, we will see.
Yes, and we can have cupcakes or something. So if you're in your new house, have cupcakes and let me know ahead of time, and I'll make sure I have a cupcake and we can cupcake. What? We did it when we were meeting live face to face. We would have cupcakes on special occasions. Why can't we have 700-mile distant cupcakes?
Because I only weigh 20 pounds less than Biggs. That's probably why. But,
Well, I can't help that. You're the one who moved back to Tennessee where everything's dipped in bacon grease before it's cooked.
No, sadly,
And
I'd put this.
in before it's served.
I'd put this weight on before. I put this weight on because Corona. Being stuck in the house is not good.
That's your Corona weight. That's what
Let's be honest. Me stuck in the house is no bueno. All right,
everybody else is getting Corona weight. I'm like, man, with Corona, I can actually get back on my diet. And
I'm like, is that a cookie the neighbor's having? Like,
I think I smell Chips Ahoy open down the street.
no, man, I'm telling you, our neighbor, my mom's neighbor, something was wrong in their house, and she called us, and I ran over there, and and as I'm leaving, she's like, "Would you like some cookies?" And I'm like,
And you were like, I think you know where this is about to go.
and they were really good cookies. And I've got to go finish fixing her fan at some point, but her house didn't burn down, so I got cookies.
Oh, that's good. I'm
Yay,
glad her
30-second
house-
buffer.
Yep. You can hit that